So I am happy to welcome Dina Tibbs, who is one of our very founding Tiny Biz Village members. And I really want her to share with us what it was that drew her to this and how she proceeded with it. So I have my four questions set up here. And the first one is, Dina, what was it that made you want to move toward a tiny biz? And which floor plan did you identify with most?
Oh, you're asking me to scratch. Well, what do you mean? I think I've always really been in a tiny biz, but there was always this external story about having to make it more than that. And I'm notorious for taking sacred work and making it, as one of my teachers, Bev Barnes, calls it, survival work, when it really wasn't very necessary. And I've done a lot of inner work around that, and what were the real reasons for the current iteration of my business. I've been in business for myself since I left telecommunications in 2001 too.
Wow.
Um, in a variety of modalities, always designed to make a bigger difference in the world. And funny story, because I like doing my astrology and all the sort of a little bit of woo stuff, and I've seen brilliant astrologers and tarot readers over the years, and I've seen ones that are meh, but one, and it keeps coming back to me over and over again, always, and this has been, I don't know, 15, at least 15 or 16 years ago. One said, your work, you will be sustained and supported in other ways. Your work is meant to be altruistic.
Yeah.
And so I fought that, of course, all along the way, because I think as business owners, especially if we came out of corporate, first of all, we think that we can just easily transition right from a corporate role, even at a high level management role, into entrepreneurship. And yes, I had a lot of skills that helped me. But, in a corporate role, I wasn't running the marketing. I wasn't doing the finance. I was doing operations process. So I'm great at operations
I,
process. So,
I know
you know,
so much.
but, all of that, to think like we think we're coming out of that to do some sort of soul work out in the world, and the business part's just going to like come like magic. And that's not really how it works necessarily. And then we start beating ourselves up and we work around the clock, and then all of a sudden the soul work is soul sucking.
Oh, what a great way to say that. The soul work becomes soul sucking.
Yeah, and you got
So
to question
true.
over and over again, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? So kind of fast forward now to 2022. In 2017 I opened a studio that was a 20-year dream of having a gathering place for women to come together and self-express. But yet again, I took my desire to be in community and created survival work and bills to pay out of it when it was kind of not necessary
Well, and
in
that's what I
many
was going
ways.
to ask about is like, how did your business model work before? So you actually had a brick and mortar location.
I still do. The lease is up in September. Wasn't getting out of it early because, a lot of, I was able, it wasn't in my integrity to try very hard, because there are people really who do need that relief, rent
Yeah.
relief, the business loans, all of that. And so, I left it alone, and I told my landlords, if somebody wants it, they can have it before, my lease is up, but nobody's trying super hard to go show it. And subleasing and managing people is also not, that's not tiny biz. Don't want to be doing that. So, yes, I was at a point where I was doing 4 and 5 workshops a month, plus my one-on-one. Along with that comes a whole ton of marketing. So if you don't love marketing, I mean, and I like it. I wouldn't say I love it. And when it begins to become more of what you're doing every day than the soul work, that's when things start going.
Yeah. And what
Um,
parts of marketing were you doing? What flavors?
you name it, of course, in-person networking, virtual networking, certainly. I mean, and I still do have a very regular content creation schedule out on social media, but it's social media. So we won't go into that whole sort of land of unicorns and rainbows. That's not necessarily true. I share content because it feeds me. And I've come to the point where, oh, if I miss my newsletter this week, big deal. I don't like, but
Right.
I used to, it was a way to hold myself accountable, though, also to writing and creating content
Oh,
because I
there
am
you
a
go.
writer.
And as you say, that feeds you. So that was part of,
Right, right.
yeah.
So, in the midst of all of the stuff, COVID happens, everything had to be rethought. I have no problem doing online business. Like I said, I come from a tech background, and I used to do it before I had the studio, so not a big deal there. But then I had my own personal journey this past summer with breast cancer.
Oh,
Which I'm fine. I'm fine now. Um, my mother also is having her health challenges, and we had to move her in. And I knew when I got the studio that this was going to be a 5-year experiment. Like I knew that's all I wasn't going to be signing a lease for 10 and 20 years. That was never my intention. So it gave me what I wanted. I think it gave the women in the community what they wanted. But I'll be an empty nester at the end of 23 also.
right.
So
It's all the seasons, right? You don't have to make the previous choices wrong or gosh, I was so dumb or anything like that. It was perfect for the time. And now things are changing.
yeah, and I'm a firm believer in, first of all, we don't always have to be in growth and expansion mode. Sometimes growth and expansion is an internal process that actually means I'm doing less.
Yeah. Yeah. So what have you simplified?
So that, well, like I said, I've let go of, okay, the studio, it's a financial thing right now that I want to be liberated from eventually, but um, teaching less classes for sure, because for every group, well, group or one-on-one, but particularly if you're, putting 4 and 5 group events out per month, that's like I said, a
Yeah.
lot of marketing that goes on. Now, thankfully, I've had the blessing of creating customer evangelists over the years. So, I have a lot of, I focus on loving my existing community, put more energy there often than to always be trying to get new people through the door. But part of that is because my work is very deep. It's not for everyone. So a lot of the traditional marketing tactics and masculine ways of marketing just are, they don't work for me necessarily because of the depth of my work. It has to be, in many cases, even though people will say, oh, you're wasting your time by doing like one-on-one discovery type stuff, that is not a waste of time for me. That builds a
Oh.
level of trust, and I enjoy doing it. Um,
And if they order by midnight tonight, they get a set of Ginsu knives, right?
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the simplifying is like this year, I'm really sitting in process to say, if the muse, my internal creative muse, comes up with something fun to do in the studio, I'm going to do it, almost like in a pop-up sort of situation. Invite people, send the invitation direct, and whoever wants to come. I'm keeping them small anyway because, distancing, safety, because it's more energetic, but one of my values is to always keep safe and sacred space. Now it has to have moved into also the physical realm of safety, which I cannot guarantee all the time. Of course, no one can, but to be mindful of those things as well. So, um,
I love
but
that.
I'm in a no hurry, no rush for the next vision and dream to come through. In fact, talking about, there was no disappointment over what happened in the studio or COVID or any of that. It's like I brought a 20-year dream into form, and then we outgrow our dreams sometimes.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I get chills. Outgrow our dreams. Yeah.
And then for me, it's like I look around. Of course, I do a lot of gratitude practices, and this is what I'm speaking to is not for people who have to do work in the corporate world, for example, to put food on the table. I'm the first person to when I do coaching work, soul coaching work, I have coached so many women back to work because again, they have this idea of what entrepreneurship looks like. It all of a sudden is sucking their soul, and they're not sustaining themselves.
Right.
I once had a teacher say, don't cut down your tree. Your tree is your sustenance. And so, but if you can understand why your soul dropped here on the planet and you bring that knowledge into any vocation or career that you're in, because that is not your sole purpose, that's one
Right.
facet of it,
Bring it to the next room you
then
walk
it
into.
shifts everything, and you come to understand that that is your physical sustenance, and your soul work may not be something that is about making money at all.
Yeah. Well,
And
and
I
that's
sit
what you
with
said
that
before, your
every.
soul work and your survival work.
Yeah, and that's a term coined by Bev Barnes, who I recently met, and she's awesome. She's in Canada. She runs the Souls Calling Academy, s- and I've used different language for that over the years, but we just get it so confused sometimes. Sometimes
Right.
there's our sacred assignment, which is kind of like this overarching, like I came to know that even when I was in corporate, I was here to mentor and inspire. That's it. And if I show up that way everywhere, including my family life, including my relationships, including my friendships, including myself, first and foremost, am I inspiring myself or am I being inspired? Because it's a two-way
Right.
street. I seek out inspiration. That's part of how I roll. Um, and so you bring that to wherever you're standing or sitting, and it becomes just a whole different ball game in how you walk through the world. But like I said,
Right.
I look around here and I sit in gratitude every day, and I say, how much do I have to do? What do I want to do? What's fun? What's simple? Like those become sort of the compass point questions for me.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
simplicity. And,
and
and I
it's
still, we like to overcomplicate things. It's just the way the human mind operates, even in the spiritual practices. Sometimes we make it so hard. And I'm like, no, my spiritual practice is my transition during the day of meditating while I'm washing the dishes. It's got to bring
right.
the sacred to the mundane. And I think very often we're all trying to be extraordinary. And we are. We're all,
Right?
it's a
How can you try
paradox
to
of
be what
being
you are?
these unique, beautiful beings and essences, and yet sometimes we get wrapped around the axle of how much the world is seeing of that.
Yeah.
And so there's this balance of, yeah, I want to share with the world, and I also want to be like living my ordinary, boring life. I joke that I'm like the soccer mom spiritualist. Like, I'm not doing sacred site pilgrimages, although I might after I'm an empty nester, but I have to find that way to come home here in every moment in my like suburban house or at my studio or whatever. And that to me is the simplicity of just showing up to life.
Yeah. And it
And
sounds like that ability to recognize what's at the core of what you're offering through your business
Mhm.
also carries over into every other aspect of your life, really has allowed you to not so much compartmentalize, like that's business and this is life, but I'm one person and now I'm free to bring more of me.
Mhm.
What is it that you're bringing more of yourself to these days?
Ha. Oh, well, it was funny because over the summer, or it was around fall, I think it was a fall equinox, I did a from home weekend long yoga retreat, which I do with this teacher several times a year. Um, and he had an elder, Buddhist elder, on that weekend, and he was so funny. And he's about 80 something. And then I thought about him. Tenson Bob is what he's known as. And then Betty White before she just passed. And I said, I want to be a mix of those two when I grow up, except that it needs to be now. And if cancer hasn't taught me anything, and that's what most people have been through, any kind of serious health journey, it's another spiritual awakening moment, which could lead into, excuse me, dark night of the soul moments, which I won't get into all that because I've had them. In this case, it didn't, because I was like, okay, this is my moment to really understand what's important. I mean, I think I did a decent job before, but like, when you kind of sit with death in the face, not to get, but I mean, that is what most of the spiritual practices out in the world are about
Yeah.
is, you know, dying and living at the same time. But it's my focus is really fluidity. I'm still in my visioning process. I will be until February 1st, 2nd next week, because that's how I do it. Very long process from winter to as the seeds are starting to germinate under the soil, otherwise known as Imbolc or St. Bridget's Day next week. But what's coming through constantly is this year is really about two things, well, several words, but weaving conscious connections. And again, I don't compartmentalize. So I'm looking at what does that mean I use technology called the life wheel, very well known when I work with others. And it's like we don't compartmentalize. However, sometimes certain amounts of energy, like there's no such thing as work-life balance, right? You got work
Yeah.
and then you got all the rest of life. No, that's not how it works. So sometimes certain aspects of your life are being called for more energy than others.
Hmm.
Um, but that's kind of the overarching. And so for this year, I think for me, it's going to be really building. And the other animal card that keeps coming is the beaver, and it's around building solid foundations. And that could mean anything. In winter, it is about energetically building foundations, looking at your financial foundations, looking at
Hmm.
what you need to sustain yourself. And for me this year, it's those foundations are going to be around connection in all ways. Because for me, truly, the tiny piece, which is coming, is that tarot reader or whatever she was years ago who said the altruism. So I am blessed in a lot of ways, and I have a core belief that soul work should not be reserved for the privileged. And it's not because I can't charge what I'm worth and all this other baloney.
All
It's
those little trips.
it's because I really feel the need and call to be more in service in the world to something bigger than myself. How that's going to look and for what populations, I'm not sure yet because I'm passionate about a lot of things. And the world needs a lot of help right now. So, and the interesting part though, going back to simplicity, is like I've thought about it, but I don't want to run a nonprofit. That's more work than running a six-figure business.
Exactly.
I
Yes.
just want to show up and give of myself. And so that's, and coming to the essence of it, I was on a call with some soul sisters a few weeks ago, and it's like, I just want to be in conversation and be able to witness, listen people, and provide guidance based on my wisdom and experience.
Beautiful. And if somebody wants to partake of your soul work and explore your community, how can they best connect with you?
You could certainly go onto my website, www.amusedwomanstudios.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter. And I write basically wisdom teaching once a week. I don't, I invite people in when I have an offering, but don't expect to be bombarded with I actually just rewrote my welcome to my newsletter text, and it was like, yeah, you're not a sales funnel to me, and you're not a launch sequence to me. You're a human being whom I'd like to connect with.
That feels delicious. Thank you.
So that's what I tell people. I'm like, yeah, and you don't have to agree with my wisdom either. I love to get feedback. I like to, get it, like you're crazy, lady. I have pretty thick skin. But so that's the best way to just kind of tap in. I have a Facebook group where I do a little deeper level of teaching each week to kind of go along with that same theme. And that's Amused Woman Circle, and that's primarily for women. And those are the two best ways. I'm in the process of moving platforms for my website and rewriting everything, and it's hopefully going to be done in the next couple of weeks, and we'll bring even more clarity to how my work is moving, because the existing website really did focus on the studio. When you have a brick and mortar, that's sort of the front and center
Ah,
piece. And so now it's moving back towards, this is sort of this one-on-one connection work, because that is simple for me. It really
excellent.
is.
And it helps to feed you and
Mhm.
feed those other aspects of being able to show up everywhere you walk.
Yeah,
Love
yeah.
that. Beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I look
It's an
forward
honor.
to more discussions in the Tiny Biz Village.
Me too. Thank you.